Hi, I'm Dennis Downs. I'm an artist, and what follows is a slideshow about the building of Studio North, also known as the Barbarian shelter. This is a aerial photo, obviously, of the island. Not a lot of neighbors, and there's lots of boulders in the water that you have to go around if you want to make it to the island every time. I've been up there 32 trips over the last 11 years. My wife Gail's been up every year for a week, also to help on the different projects. The slideshow that follows will explain a little bit about what it took and the people we met up there. This is the kind of terrain you're talking about. It's almost like the foothills of Colorado when you're driving. It's beautiful along Lake Superior. This is the site on the island that we chose after a couple of seasons of just travel, trying to make trails on the island. It's a cool spot, little peninsula, and the view faces the west. This is just a shot coming home in the motorboat. Up there I have a little 14-foot rowboat with a 9-horse to go back and forth. This is Klaus. He was the guide up there for the Normandy Lodge, and that's my wife Gail. That he's spending time teaching us about the different ways to navigate this water system. This is his wife, Wilma. Again, these people lived in the wilderness up there for 26 years year-round. This is Klaus taking the time to take me out, show me fishing spots, talk about the wolves, the moose, the bear, mushrooms. Great guy. Spent a lot of time with me. This gives you an idea of, with a map that Klaus actually made with lines, it shows you the far top right is where I have to start in that little motorboat with everything I'm bringing and negotiate underwater boulders, rocks, sandbars, sandy narrows, marshes, and wild rice beds. Takes, if it's perfectly clear, 35 to 40 minutes for me to get there one way. This is a view of, on the way home in the motorboat, of one of the 35 islands that are on this body of water. This is Klaus and I and Gail going through the rock cut. Again, you have to know where to go, or you might get home, but it's going to take a lot longer. This is Wilma. She wasn't afraid of anything, from cleaning a moose to catching fish to gathering mushrooms. Great gal. This is one of Gail's birthday parties. She comes up every year the week of the 21st of July, and we're kicking back a little bit. This is my laundromat on the island. It gets so hot you sweat, and then you have to change clothes before you go back because the water is still 30 or 45 degrees. This is Gail and I at the southern end of our island, near another place we're trying to make a boat landing. This is, again, Wilma. When you live in the wild for 26 years year-round, you get to know the animals, and she's hand-feeding all kinds of birds. Later, after many tries, I got one little bird to come and land on my hand. That's the view of where I go to work dead ahead through that pass. This is a picture of the four of us on the Michipicoten River. We took them out to this spot. It's just a great place to have a drink. It's a long drive. This is a picture of the concrete being delivered so that I could take the concrete bags, something I underestimated the amount I would need, from the land, which it's hard to even get the concrete delivered. It's 40 miles to the nearest town in either direction, and the towns are tiny. So you can't take all the concrete out at one time. You got to bring the bags slowly as you're making your daily trips out there while you're getting the site ready to dig the footings, to mix the concrete, to make the footings on the pylons. This is me clearing the site. that we finally decided on, and starting to put in the stakes and give the actual dimensions of the cabin. I brought tools out over the course of previous years and had them stashed out there. That's my concrete mixing machine, the tub. This is me actually in a hole. I made 10 footings, and on top of those there were circular pylons that went up as well. This is actually the forms that I made. I cut rebar that I brought out to the island as well, to try to do it right. You want to keep the cabin above the snow line. I wanted to do this the right way. I just underestimated how difficult it was to bring all this material out alone. This is me just measuring the height of the lines for the site and for the depth of the holes. And this was one of the first ones actually finished, and then a pylon, 8-inch pylon, will go on top of that, and all 10 of those will be level, and that's what the first row of logs will go on, keeping them out of the snow during the winter. What you're looking at here is obviously me bringing supplies out. Every time you go, every season, you've got to bring all the things you need. So every day on the way to work, you're bringing other things out to the island site. After a while, I wised up and made a windshield that keeps the spray off of me a little bit. It's really cold in the morning. You don't want to get there soaking wet and then be in wet clothes for the rest of a 10-hour or 12-hour workday. Some days when you get to the boat, it's full of water. The bow of the boat gets rubbed on the rocks. There is no nice place to park when I get there. This is what I've worked out with Dustin up there. I got his little bilge pump, and I brought a battery that I keep fully charged. And it runs a bilge when this happens, and then we try to fix it. There's always big critters up there that I don't even know what they are. This guy's hitchhiking in the boat. The wasps up there, or the hornets, whatever they are like the size of a baby hummingbird. This is a much more beautiful creature in the front of the boat. It's my wife on one of her trips. Again, everything you bring to the island and use, you have to bring off the island. What you're looking at here is a snowstorm. It's something I didn't mention. It's 14 hours of driving one way to get to where I'm at. So you don't miss a day of work. In 32 trips, I have never missed a day of work. Whether it's snow, rain, you got to get there. You got to get something done. This is me at the island. I get out of my Carhartts and you start your day. Some days you have to start later, but you still go. This is how foggy it is when the weather changes. You got to let the sun burn it off. This is when it's starting to clear. I sit in the rowboat. I'm slowly getting out to where I have to go. Again, you can't go fast. You can't outrun the fog or get into the fog. You'll hit rocks. I need landmarks to make this trip every time. This gives you a great example. It's clear on my side, and on the other side of the rock cut that I have to go through dead center and to the left, it's completely fogged in. So you got to go slow, and it just takes maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours to get there. On the way home, this is an osprey nest that I passed. It's really cool. It's huge, and the two osprey are bringing back food to the chicks. What we're looking at here is actually the pylons now are up. All 10 of them are done. I'll remove the cardboard from them, and we're going to start on row 1. This is actually after the pylons were cured. I coated everything with tar to inhibit moisture ruining the concrete in the future. This is Gail and I turning around the log to get it in position for row 1. And this is actually Gail and I together. We notched the first log together. It took 20 times of cutting. You have to match each end of the log. They're different dimensions, so it was a little tricky. Neither one of us had ever notched a log in our life. Later, again, I'm coating all the openings with a preservative to get rid of fungus in the future. Everyone said the worst part, the most dangerous part of a cabin for rot was where the logs are joined. So we coated everything. Every time I made a cut, I coated a cut. This is actually showing how it's progressing. Pylons are up. This is me dragging a line to the winch to pull up, and now I'm alone, so I'm pulling up the logs any way I can, no matter how it is. Just getting ready for row 2. This is another one of my tools, a PV. It gives me some leverage pushing these things around. So now we got row 2 done, and I think that's as far as I got. And there's 2 pylons in the center. Those will be to support the floor better, and I'll make a beam to go across that. This is log 1. Everything again is not in perfect order. And another thing I wanted to mention was filming myself. Someone told me to watch Survivor Man years back. He's actually from Ontario, and that's the technique I use. It's difficult to film yourself while you're working and capture what you're doing. This is actually what's involved with taking the logs down is hard enough. Getting a tree to fall right, then you got to peel off every branch, then you got to get it in position off the ground so you can turn it and it starts to dry. It doesn't soak up moisture from the ground when it rains or snows. So here I'm actually getting a log starting to be peeled. Again, sometimes it goes smoothly, sometimes it's extremely hard to get the bark off. This is a different site where there's some logs for the roof. You can see the size, and this is my ridge pole. I took care to pick the ridge pole out, so it's perfectly even. It's 10 inches in diameter, and I've made sure she dried very well before I moved it to the site. This is another example of some things I'll do to the cabin later. I'm collecting these unique shapes, peeling them, drying them, coating them. I'll use them for poles for around the deck. Again, this is another part of the island, Hell's Canyon. There were about 8 or 9 logs down in that spot near the water. This is, again, just another location. You have to get the logs wherever you can. It's not like all the logs you need are in one spot. They're all different dimensions for each row. This again is a finished shot of the ridge pole. This is the log bank. You drag, finally, when you get everything done in one area, you drag it to an area that it can stay off the ground and get ready to be moved off the island. And you have to be really careful to coat all the logs every time you're up there. What we're looking at here is something I learned from my grandfather and my uncles up on Cedar Island. It's putting boric acid rods into the logs. It helps prevent fungus inside the log later on if moisture hits them. Here you can see that I spaced them out every 1.5 feet for all 3 of the bottom rows. That'll just make the cabin last longer and the logs last longer. This is what happens if you lose a log that you took down in the forest. I had maps for everything, where everything was, and you still lose things. The forest is that dense. You can see the mushrooms on that log. This is to support the floor in the middle. I made a beam by bolting together these pieces of lumber. That'll help support the center of the floor. This shows you the other half of the floor, ready to get the plywood on. Everything's galvanized, hangers, triple coated screws, and then tarred. This is our floor dance. Again, Gail was up for this event, so I timed it so the floor, we would put the last floor pieces together. When I left, I realized I couldn't have the floor intact over the winter, so I made it so that there's a 1-foot opening I can remove with screws and a screw gun, and then I tar all that so it can drain in the wintertime. This is me losing my mind, thinking over what I've got to do for row 5. This is the starter row 5, and this is a log bank for the next set. You can see the color codes on the ends of the logs. That tells me which logs are in which row. Again, you can't depend on electricity in this part of Canada. It just is shut off for random reasons. So I have 2 manual alarm clocks to wake me up every morning. This is a shot of Twin Rocks. It's on the opposite side of the island. When cutting the trail to get to the logs with, and by the way, this is my Echo. I've used it to do all the trails and taken down every tree on the island. You have to move around every time, so it's a shorter walk to get to opening up these trails. These are boxes I've gotten to protect the material I leave out on the island during the winter and from the animals. The bears somehow even wanted to eat the gas and oil when I even put it up in trees. These are close-ups that they destroyed stuff that I left. So I built some bear cages early on. They weren't strong enough and they just ripped them to shreds. These are the little bears, and they turn into bigger bears. This is Eddie. He was a problem case, the first bear we saw the first day I brought Gail out to the island. That's why we nicknamed it Standing Bear Island. This is the size of the bears. Within a mile, this bear was taken of the island, 700-pounder. This is a picture of one day taking Gail for a walk to the high point on the island. When we turned around 5 minutes later, the bear had ripped this log, this sprouted tree to shreds to let us know he was there. These are moose visiting the bear cages early on in the first couple years. Then I realized I had to build a bigger, stronger bear cage for the tools. So this is what I started doing with baling wire and fresh birch log limbs. So far it's worked pretty good, and I beef it up every year. This is the end product, and it hasn't been invaded by animals yet. Okay, what we're looking at here is starting row 4, dragging the logs up, getting them in position. We're moving right along, starting to take shape. This is another shot. I think that's row 5. And these are the log hooks. So some of the different tools I use to help me pull things and grab things. Here we're at row 6 is complete, and I'm dragging up 2 more. I started using ladders. It's hard to get in and out of the cabin at this height. This is me actually turning around a log, I believe, for row 8. So we're moving along. It's starting to take shape. What we're looking at here is getting logs in position to actually drag them around the island to the site. This is jockeying them into position. Now we've got all 4, and I'll push the rowboat out, jump in, get the ropes in order, and start hauling them. This is a bad example. Don't ever do this. I got mad and I actually pulled a log up and spun it around in the boat. Don't do that. This is the logs actually being pulled around to the opposite side of the island, to the site. Worked out well. This emphasizes the rocks and the danger in this section of these lakes. If you don't know these lakes, it's going to end really poorly for you. You can't just fly around in a boat and not know where these submerged rocks are. This is in the mouth of the rock cut. If there's even a little wavy action, you'd never see the boulders till you hit them. These are huge rock piles all over the lake system, just under the surface of the. Okay, what we're looking at here is the other log bank closer to the site, but it's in a really rocky area with a lot of deadfalls under the water, so I can't use the motorboat. So I made a log bike strapped with moving straps on a seat, and I can paddle 3 to 5 logs at a time. It really works well. Once you get them moving, it's going. These are just examples of different times I use this technique. Here you can see I'm sitting on 3 logs total, and I'm pulling 2 across to the site. These are shots with the motion detector cameras that I've got all over the island. I got 5 of them. Captured some good things with these Moultries. I've used them for 11 years now. These are the twins. It's pretty cool. This is that Hell's Canyon area. Okay, we've got a lot of logs ready. They're all coded and marked for which rows they're going to be. I think these are for rows 8 through 11. And this is me on top of row 10. This again, drying some clothes for the way home. You do this almost every other day. These logs are actually now at the site. This is the path that's worn to the site from when I get the logs to the site. This is dragging them up. I think this is row 10 or 11, getting them over and up. And every year when I leave, every single year, every log gets a coat of sealer. This is me sealing the other side of the cabin. This is the hobbit hole. I finally cut into the log cabin so I don't have to climb over the walls every time with a ladder because it's getting high. What you're looking at here is the following year. I started by improving the size of the hobbit hole. I went up 5 logs. I could get in and out a lot easier. This is the part that's difficult for people with cabins, the chinking. I had a lot of years to think about it, so what I came up with was aluminum lath work for the big gaps, combined with the great stuff, and then smoothed out and then coated with concrete. Even if it's crappy out, you got to go to a different type of job. This is me with a machete cutting off the extra foam. There's always something to do. This is the north wall. You can see the amount of foam, and then this coming year I'll cut all that off. That's the last wall to finish. Again, these are cool critters on the island. These are actual photos taken of a lynx. I've seen 9 different lynx up there. Just really cool. Again, this is the coating of the ends of the logs so they don't suck moisture in during the rainy and cold winters. Okay, these are the pieces that I used for the gable. They had to be flattened on both sides. You get a better idea of how they look here. They're all supported. There's rods going through them to keep them in place. These are actually extra purlines for the roof. These were better choices, better shapes. They still have to be hauled around the island. This is some of them when they were done. The wolves up there are everywhere. Literally, you see them. This is the ridgepole in shape, and I had a lot of time to think about how I would do this. And I did it old school Egyptian style by putting ropes over a fake ridgepole, jumping off of a ladder, pulling them up 1 notch until I got to the top, and then used a ladder to get up there and actually hump it onto the last little log. This is a better shot. Shows that the gables are up, the ridge pole's in position. The other tiny poles are just to hold the roof end to end during the winter while I'm gone. The one going right to left, there's 2 supports that I added. That'll help me later on keep the roof supported as well. This is my little shelter that I've used to protect the tools that are directly in front of the cabin, and I sit under there during horrendous thunderstorms and snowstorms. This is what I came back to. Every time, you never know what's going to happen. 3 trees went down in a tiny tornado that flew through and totally destroyed my shelter. Sent a log across the cabin, a full-size 70-foot tree. I had to cut that out. And I started thinking, well, what do my trails look like? And I stopped counting at 28 major trees directly across my trail. That took a couple of days. Gail has helped me on the trails. This is a shot on one of her visits. Okay, what we're looking at here is actually the cement that's specially made to adhere to foam. And I used frog tape to put down on every run so that when I'm done with the concrete work, I peel that back and you got a nice line and you don't have to clean the concrete off of the logs. This is what it looks like in the beginning, and this is what it looks like in the end. And then again, I'll seal that. Every time we seal everything that we do. And this is like the end of the season. Every season you get a coat of stain or sealer. And this is when the gables are up and the chinking in the front is done. This you're looking at what the shoreline actually looks like everywhere. It's made up of jagged boulders. There are no easy places to land and get out of a boat. The water was really low, lower than it's been in years, so I took advantage of it, got my pry tools out, and I literally pushed boulders out into the lake and then dragged them by hand and got them out and started making my own canal, or channel. It was a little more difficult than I thought. It took about 10 days. This boulder you're looking at is the size of a laundry basket. Thank God it was round when I finally got it free from the muck and rolled it out into the bay. You can see it better in this picture. So, again, not easy, but I kept going. And now I've got a channel that's big enough to have the rowboat, and this is actually where the logs get pulled out at the site. From some of the boulders that I moved, I made a little peninsula and on the windward side of the little channel to, you could walk out on it and it will protect the boat. This is the end of the season in 2016. I'm done. I put plywood in front of the entranceway, and I actually made a little bench out of 2 jack pines I've been keeping for 10 years. So that's it. God willing, I'll be back to start on the roof in 2017 in May. That's it for now.